Hello from London and welcome to Leaders Live. I'm James Emmett. That is David Cushnan. Welcome along to the show.
We are live on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and we're on demand, and you can get in touch any which way at LeadersBiz on Twitter or by commenting underneath the live feed you're watching on LinkedIn.
On the show today, we'll be attempting to fix football's future and considering whether we need to rip it all up and start again in the company of Women in Football Chair Ebru Coxall, LaLiga's Keegan Pearce and Umberto Gandini, the former Chief Executive of AS Roma.
But first, time to take a quick look at the sports industry stories making the news over the past few days. And I've got a prop, James.
You've got a prop, David. It's if my eyes are not mistaken, it's the Manchester Guardian.
It certainly is. I'm going to hold it up here because on the front page they splash, and it's a serious story of this, of course, about the return of fans to major events. And obviously a number of events here in the UK have received test status, allowing fans access to them, not least Euro 2020, where there's the story today talking about the Scotland fans who travelled to London for the game a couple of weeks ago. Almost 1,300 Scotland fans testing positive for COVID after travelling to that game. And of course, this is increasing pressure on UK government officials to potentially move events away from London, particularly the final stages of Euro 2020. There's pressure mounting.
Yeah, different situations, of course, in different territories around the world in terms of bringing people back into stadiums and venues. Over here in the UK, we're struggling with a new Delta variant, of course, and strong concerns here. I think the main concern, probably, David, is not necessarily in the controlled environment of the stadium itself, but in all these very visible, unofficial events that are going on outside venues with large groups of people mingling with no kind of safety security protocols whatsoever.
Yeah, it feels that if there is going to be another layer of regulation, that's where it needs to be somehow, some way. In other news, you are also holding up a segment of today's Guardian, and this one, James, is focusing on a big new deal in women's football.
That's right. This is the story of DAZN, the OTT-only broadcaster, acquiring 4 years' worth of global rights, almost entirely exclusive to the UEFA Women's Champions League. Every single game is going to be available live, free to air. The territories that aren't included, just a small matter of China and the Middle East, but the rest of the world very much included.
Yeah, indeed. This one's centred very much on the mission of UEFA to grow the Champions League, of course, to turn more players into household names, teams as well, and of course inspiring the next generation of players. And it's another big move by DAZN, of course, and particularly interesting in terms of taking global rights, with those one or two exceptions, which could well be the start of a trend. And they're going to make, as you said, games available on YouTube in the first 2 years, and then a selected amount thereafter, which will be very closely watched, I think, by the industry, especially as DAZN sort of makes this move from streaming service, and everybody still rightly describes it as a streaming service, into being almost a linear channel in several markets through various distribution deals. So plenty of ways to watch the Women's Champions League if you've got a big TV.
Indeed, and it comes, I guess, hot on the heels of the Women's Super League, Women's Super League's new broadcast deal over here in the UK. Big new financial uplift for them. Reach versus revenue is always the tension going on in any of these media rights deals. No figures yet available. Clearly reach will be an important thing here, but it'll be interesting to see the revenue once that becomes available, once some enterprising hack sniffs that out from the UEFA bigwigs. Now, David.
Yes.
Summer holidays approaching, no doubt, for you. I know you like to take August off. Wherever you're going, David, I'm sure you'll be wanting to take one or two books with you.
Yeah, two in particular.
Precisely two.
We've got two to talk about. And what do you know, James?
Oh, you've got one there already.
I've got a prop. In fact, it's not a prop. It's a real-life book.
What's this? This is All to Play For by, if you just move your finger, that is by, and this is a personal copy, I see, because there's Matt Rogan's signature on a piece of paper that's come out of the book. Matt Rogan,
a personal message. Matt,
the co-founder of Two Circles, has written this book. What's it all about, Dave?
Yes, it is. Well, it's essentially Matt's blueprint for how sport can save us and how sport can take us through difficult times. Really interesting read. He's interviewed lots of bigwigs from across the industry, so I'm sure it will be on many a reading list for people in the industry. Some essential reading from Matt. It's actually out today. It's out today, available in all good bookshops. And another book that we would like to recommend that's been out for a couple of weeks now is from Scott O'Neill. This book, I believe we have a screenshot of it. There it is. Be Where Your Feet Are by Scott O'Neill. Scott O'Neill, until really very recently, the chief executive of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, which incorporates the Philadelphia 76ers basketball team, New Jersey Devils NHL team, Dignitas, the esports team, many more properties besides. Scott has literally just, within the last 24 hours, announced that he's stepping down from his role as chief executive there for the last 8 years. So a big salute to him, because he's risen to become one of the most prominent executives in the sports industry, growing that organisation into a multi-billion-dollar property, very influential group. His book, which we are recommending, is it's really good, David. I've actually read this one, and it's more than just a business book. There's all sorts of stories from his time in sport, a lot of vulnerability on show, and it's essentially a meditation on corporate mindfulness. Be where your feet are. That's the message. And if you had to distill that down further, phone down, head up. And if you had the message to you, actually. Okay. And if you distill it down even further than that, head up. Okay, good. Good stuff. So a couple of recommendations from us to you there. It is, as you may well have seen, a festival of football on today's Leaders Live. And to kick things off, delighted to say that we are joined in our expert panellist role, and he'll be with us throughout the show, by LaLiga's man in the UK and Ireland, Keegan Pearce from LaLiga's Global Network. Keegan, it is very good to have you with us. How are you?
David, James, pleasure to join you guys today. How are things?
We are well, thank you. Now, Keegan, we were just talking about books, as you may well have heard. Do you have a recommendation for us?
Two recommendations. One on the business side is Ed Catmull, former president of Disney Animation Studios, of course, and also former founder of Pixar, which is Creativity Inc. Fine book for those looking to manage in creative industries. And then recently I've gone through rereading The Club by Jonathan Clegg and Josh Robinson, obviously a timely book about the founding of the Premier League, which has some interesting messages and lessons for the topic at hand today.
Absolutely does, and we will get into that topic very shortly. Just before we begin the discussion in earnest, though, give us a little sense, Keegan, of what you and the team at LaLiga are up to during this summer break. How's it all going?
You know, this is the first summer that's felt like a summer in some time. I'm sure many in our industry feel the same way. After 2 seasons where it's been a considerable feat to get football up and running again, to be able to make it through this last season without having to delay any matches in either the first or second division in Spanish football due to COVID. Now it's really about planning properly for next season, and everything we've got in store, whether it's from a sporting perspective, whether it's from a broadcast perspective. And then no small feat is that today we've officially launched our own technology venture, LaLiga Tech, which comes to life today. This is a subsidiary company that will be, or a spin-off company rather, that is going to be managing all of LaLiga's digital properties, all of LaLiga's technology that we've developed over the course of these past 4 or 5 years, and providing solutions to the sport industry to help their own digital transformation.
Oh, no, you go, James.
We're making the same noises with our mouths. An auspicious day, Keegan. Congratulations to you and everyone at LaLiga on the launch. We'll have more on that from you, no doubt, later, and some more of your considered views on the football industry at large. But now it's time for our regular postcard from the United States, stamped and addressed to us via our colleagues at Sports Business Journal, and this time we asked football soccer beat writer Mark Burns for a health check on the sport in the US.
You know, in the world of soccer, there's a few things we're keeping a close eye on. In the run-up to the North American-based 2026 World Cup, MLS team valuations continue to soar. Two teams in Houston Dynamo FC and Orlando City have recently sold, with Houston selling for close to $400 million to a real estate investor named Ted Siegel. And Orlando has sold to the Wilfs family, who also own the Minnesota Vikings, for a reported $400 million to $450 million range. Meanwhile, in DC, the DC United recently sold a 1% stake in the club to NFL running back Mark Ingram, and the reported number was $710 million valuation, which is the largest ever reported in MLS history. Celebrity ownership isn't just in MLS, though. We look at the NWSL, the women's league here in North America, and there's celebrity ownership across the board. Angel City FC in Los Angeles, the Chicago Red Stars, Washington Spirit, and Kansas City as well. Angel City's ownership has dozens of folks from the media, finance, celebrity, media, and sports business community, including the likes of actresses Natalie Portman and Eva Longoria, and also Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. In DC, you have Chelsea Clinton, daughter of former US President Bill Clinton, and Alexander Ovechkin, Washington Capitals star. With the Chicago Red Stars, ESPN media personality Sarah Spain joined the ownership group recently. And in Kansas City, Brittany Matthews, who is the well-known fiance of Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, is also a part owner there. And finally, we're keeping a close eye on Liga MX and MLS and the closing ties of both of these leagues. It's been widely rumored and speculated that these two leagues could merge in the coming years. The two have staged the Leagues Cup and the Campeones Cup. The former is a single elimination tournament featuring teams from both leagues, while the latter features both the MLS champion and Liga MX champion. And so it remains to be seen what will happen in the future if there's an actual merger, but all signs are pointing to closing ties between these two organizations. And even this summer, both leagues will see each other's all-stars compete against one another at MLS All-Star in Los Angeles.
Keegan, the Super League project, obviously, a key moment over the past few months, and it's exposed some of the fault lines that I think everybody probably knew were present between teams, between leagues, between governing bodies. What's your overall sense of the financial, the structural health of European football this summer?
You know, I think the most important thing to bear in mind for the health of European football is that we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That really, COVID really brought a certain degree of uncertainty, particularly for clubs that weren't able to welcome fans into their venues. But we can certainly say, in terms of the moment that European football is in at this point in time, that the worst is now behind us. I think it's also important to remember the size of the industry that we're talking about here. We're talking about a 30 billion euro industry. So if you take European football altogether, clubs, federations, national teams, European competitions, this is bigger than any single North American sport that we can think of. And so really when we're talking about an industry surviving something like a pandemic, just recognizing the feat that it was to bring football back. LaLiga together with the Premier League and the Bundesliga were pioneers in that. And UEFA obviously did their part as well, both in terms of sort of tweaking the format to finish the Champions League at the end of last season, and obviously moving the European Championships back by 1 year as well, and allowing that space for football to come back on its own timelines.
One of the major objections, certainly here in the UK, and would be really interested to get a view on how it was in Spain, was, of course, the trickle-down economics of this, and the fact that the football pyramid, the 92 clubs in England, would be significantly adversely affected by the elite clubs, so to speak, moving away into their own closed league. What's the situation in terms of those sort of trickle-down economics in Spain, and how vital is the football pyramid in that part of the world?
The pyramid in Spain is just as important as it is to football in England. Our league oversees the top 2 divisions of men's professional football, specifically men's football, because women's football is under a different governance structure that sits outside of LaLiga. And the 42 teams that are across those leagues obviously are all motors of professional sport within Spain. And LaLiga itself, in addition to the revenue that we generate for clubs, we also give 125 million euro as recently as this past year to sports across Spain, not just the rest of the football pyramid, but other sporting federations. We also offer technology. We have our own OTT platform, which gives exposure to sports beyond football. And so, the economics of the pyramid are vital, and having success within healthy, sustainable domestic leagues is an important component of that pyramid.
And what's your sense as we sit here? What's your sense of what the biggest challenge facing European football in particular is right now?
I think one of the biggest challenges facing European football is to reach some sense of consensus of what are the problems we're trying to solve. I think there are certainly a lot of headlines that have been garnered by this Super League project. The project is gone, but I think the Super League ideology has maybe not gone away. And for me, Super League ideology is about thinking that clubs are bigger than competitions. Just like, some players sometimes think they're bigger than clubs within a club environment. But I think one of the great things about the football pyramid in Europe is that it's over a century old, that much of the value of European football comes from the merit-based system that is the pyramid. I think it's the admiration of the entire world. I can certainly speak as somebody who grew up in the United States. Football fans in the US, soccer fans in the US, look to the European football pyramid with admiration. And when we talk about, so what can we do to improve European football, it's really about football living by its own means and learning to have sustainable growth, which I think is the biggest challenge ahead.
Keegan, you're doing a great job as we look to get the line back to Ebru. I'm also going to bring in Umberto Gandini, our second guest, in a moment. But just one more for you before we do that, Keegan. The viewers may have noticed by your accent, it's a North American accent, I think we can say that. Tell us a little bit from your perspective, and almost a personal perspective, about some of the pros and cons that you see of the US model, the closed, no relegation model that's widespread across the major leagues in that part of the world.
Professional sports on both sides of the Atlantic, grew up in very different contexts. Obviously, you have a closed system in most of the major North American leagues. Since today's panel is talking about football, I can certainly speak as a fan of soccer who grew up in the U.S. following the sport since the early 90s. And I really do think that there is something so valuable and unique in the system that exists in Europe. It's what gives sense and structure to the way that football is played and governed within Europe. And, if you look at the US, not only you have recently Major League Soccer announcing that they're going to be creating their own division that will sit sort of below Major League Soccer. So they want to build their own pyramid as well within that football structure. But one of the most sort of vibrant grassroots movements amongst fans in North America is actually pushing for promotion and relegation between different divisions of soccer in the United States. And so, yes, there are two different philosophies, but I think it's also important to understand that ecosystems grow up in different places and that there are reasons behind them that have an intrinsic value beyond just comparing models or comparing colors of a vehicle, shall we say.
Good stuff, Keegan. We will be back with you shortly.
And I actually have a question for you, David.
Okay.
We've been attempting to talk about the European Super League at least over the last 10 or 15 minutes. Your considered reflections, I guess, or you said you had some. So we are a month or so after the event now. It boiled up, it simmered down. The clubs in question, at least over here in the UK, have been fined. I think there are still some pending lawsuits over in Spain, at least. has this problem gone away as far as you're concerned, or are we on the verge of really quite serious change in football?
I think they've been fined, and that's one thing, but I think they probably more damagingly have been really stung by the reaction to this from their own fans and just the whole of the football community, really. I struggle still to understand quite why they were so surprised or taken aback or hadn't predicted that sort of reaction given what they were planning, and also the way that they announced it, sort of, if you remember, almost by stealth on a Sunday evening. In all sorts of ways, it was a communications disaster. But it was a flawed idea as well, given everything that we know about the importance of the football pyramids, as we've been talking about with Keegan. But I don't think it's gone away. I think there's still money to be made in football by the big clubs. There are still clearly tensions which have been somewhat laid bare between the top teams and the governing bodies, and that will only continue. And if the teams, and more particularly if the owners, believe there's a way to make more money, then ultimately they will try and do that, I think, in whatever way. But it's got to be done in a much more carefully constructed and frankly just smarter way.
Yeah, I think you're right, David, and there is a fundamental tension within this football pyramid that we have, I think, lauded on this show already. Keegan spoke very eloquently about the importance of a football pyramid, but the thing that a football pyramid does is incentivize clubs to spend to get higher in the pyramid or to maintain their position in the pyramid. And without the proper checks and balances in place, these clubs are going to overspend, as they have shown time and time again. And while that situation is ongoing, these clubs at the very top level are going to find themselves paying more money than they're getting all the time. So, as you say, this opportunity to make money does exist if football is reshaped, and there will be plenty of losers in that reshaping process. But that money isn't necessarily going into the pockets of billionaire American owners necessarily. It's going to player salaries and agent fees if the pyramid remains as it is.
Absolutely right, and I think whichever direction it goes and whatever happens, it's going to be a painful process from here, I think.
Talking of painful processes, David, I know our producers have been working very hard to get our guests back online. So I think we have Ebru Coxell with us again, the chair of Women in Football. There you are, Ebru. I can see you nodding your head in a smooth fashion, actually. So I think the internet's working well where you are. Let's pick up where we left off then, Ebru. You're about to give your considered reflections on the European Super League, what the clubs got right, what the clubs got wrong.
Let's give it a try again. So I was saying that if they had gotten something right, then today the European Super League would be on, which means the wrongs were more than the rights, it seems like. And at the top of the list was the lack of proper stakeholder consultation. It seems like it was a decision that was taken by a small group of people who were obviously authorized to take that decision, but without taking into consideration all the consequences of that decision. And we also talked about how the PR aspect of it was rather not well prepared, and the story was not told in the right way, and immediately, it went sour. And one of the aspects that the founders highlighted was higher revenues, obviously, for those that are involved, but possibly at the expense of the remaining clubs from each of the participating leagues. So it was not clear whether the project actually did generate more revenues for the overall football pyramid. And it seemed like in the last minute, the women's game was thrown into it as almost like a carrot, but again, without any consultation whatsoever with the main stakeholders within the women's game.
Indeed, rushed to say the least, I would suggest. Ebru, we've heard earlier from Keegan Pearce from LaLiga, who was talking about the integrity of the football pyramid and the importance of keeping that integrity across world football, really, and anything that jeopardises that is dangerous. David and I were sitting here in the studio talking about the fact that this danger of a breakaway hasn't necessarily gone away. The structural issues in football remain. The pyramid, just as much as it is a compelling proposition and a historical fact, and it's what we all love about football, it does incentivise clubs to overspend potentially, which is arguably the root of a lot of their problems when it comes to wanting to break away. Ebru, you've been around the game a fair while. You've been involved in all sorts of discussions, I'm sure, about reshaping governance structures and competition formats and, moving money around potentially. What's your best guess as to what happens next? This problem's not going away, is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's been around for a long time. It's why European Club Forum was formed, and Umberto was part of the founding members, and then we served together in the ECA back in 2011-12 period. It was again on the table. So every time there's a new Champions League and Europa League cycle, it comes back to the table because the big clubs want to play each other more often and thus generate more revenue. So this was a cry that was loud and clear, which needs to be addressed. And the new current Champions League and Europa League and Conference League structure possibly does not address all the concerns. So I think there will be another round at the drawing table trying to find some solutions to satisfy all the parties. But this time, I think it's really important to take into consideration Gen Z as well. I mean, they're coming very strongly as fans, as future administrators in the game. Their attention span has been, obviously, we all know, reduced. They don't like maybe necessarily going to the live matches as much as our generation did, or watching a full game from beginning to end. And their expectations are slightly different in the way they consume football. But equally important, they have their value systems are very much aligned to support the biggest problems in the world right now, whether it's equality, whether it is about environment or sustainability or hunger or, human rights. I think they want to see from both governing bodies and their clubs and the players they adore more commitment to all these causes. And there's also now new ways of consumption, as you explained at the beginning. The zone agreement for women's football is going to bring it to, hundreds of millions of fans all over the world, and will allow them to really appreciate what women's football is about. So I do expect many changes in terms of the governance structure as well. As we all very well know, the fan-led review is going on in the UK. In fact, myself and our CEO, Jane Purden, submitted evidence this morning from our point of view to the fan-led review. And there is certainly, in the UK at least, big discussions taking place in terms of new governance structures.
You mentioned the DAZN Champions League deal, which is obviously a big moment. I wonder what your view is, Ebru, on where, if at all, women's football should sit and fit within the existing governance and, financial structures, I suppose, of football, or is there an opportunity to do something completely different as women's football continues on its pretty explosive growth curve?
Yeah, there has been several, arguments and requests to set up separate structures for women's football, even including a women's FIFA, for example. But I personally don't think that's the right way to go. I think that within the existing structures, women's football is better served if it's part of the overall game. And hopefully in a few years, we will never have to speak about women's, football or female players, but simply football and players, and no gender attached to it. I think what UEFA and WSL have done are very good examples of unbundling the rights for women's football and allowing it to create its own sponsorship structures, its own commercial potential, and to stand on its feet. And that way, it's also proven to the rest of the world that it is actually a very viable and attractive product. So all we need is a bit more commitment from both owners, from the governing bodies and clubs and sponsors and media to showcase what is a very, very fast-growing segment of the football industry.
Ebru, final question for you. Apologies, it's been slightly shorter than we intended, but you've been able to make some great points, so thank you for that. But here's the big question. If you were tomorrow, and let's hope this happens, appointed World Football President, with total power, what would be the first change that you would make?
I would redesign the boards, because I think that currently the biggest bottleneck is the way the boards are composed within the governing bodies and to a certain extent with the clubs as well. For proper governance structures, you need both the right set of skills and experience around the table, but also independence. And imagine, as a president, you go into an election, you don't know who's going to sit on your board. You don't know what kind of skill sets or experiences or cognitive diversity you are going to achieve. And that ends up in a lot of the times groupthink and also not high-functioning boards. So I would definitely ensure and make it mandatory that starting from the very top, all boards within football have some independent directors sitting on them who are chosen based on completely their experience and skills, but also paying very special attention to the diversity and equality aspects, because we all know that boards that have these diverse characteristics actually are the ones where someone can overcome the blind spots and say, but wait a minute, why don't we think about this? Or why don't we consider this alternative? So my first action would definitely be about the composition of the boards.
Good stuff. Ebru Koksel, thank you ever so much for joining us. And I'm glad we finally got to speak, and hopefully we can do it in person very soon.
I as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebru. You are watching Leaders Live. It's time for us to take a quick break now and to see the latest from our partners, Infront X. Welcome back to Leaders Live in partnership with our friends at Infront X. We've got Keegan Pearce from LaLiga with us, more from him in a moment. And we've also, James, got Umberto Gandini with us.
We do indeed. And just a moment to apologise to people watching this on LinkedIn. We have had some issues on the audio for Umberto, but let's see whether we can bring Umberto Gandini, the former CEO of AS Roma and a current president of Lega Basket, back with us. Umberto, are you there?
Yes, I am, James. I'm sorry for that, David.
No problem, Umberto. Good to hear you loud and clear. Umberto, we've heard a lot now about the European Super League, so let's move the conversation on a little bit to a kind of existential threats maybe in football, and let's see what you consider to be the biggest challenge facing the football industry now. And once you've identified that, how would you solve it?
Well, I think it's pretty much common knowledge now that the change into the audience and the change of the appetite for football from the new generation is becoming the biggest problem. The competition coming from esports or e-gaming, the attention span very short of the new generation. And this is one of the points that has been brought up also by the people behind the Super League. So something needs to be addressed there, even if we must be honest that now we are witnessing a fantastic European Championship season where the games are totally unpredictable. There is a lot of fun and entertainment to see people back in the stadia. The game is changed through the pandemic. Needless to say, the 5 substitutions per game made a different approach to the game for coaches. The lack of spectators in the stand made the game different. Now that the people is coming back to the stadium, we are going to see some changes, but some are there to stay. I know there is a debate about the 5 substitution again for the Premier League, for example, coming up. And needless to say that this is a game changer. But the most important thing is that the audience is getting older and older as far as broadcasting is considered. And broadcasting still is the most important and prominent revenue stream that comes to football worldwide. So something needs to be done there. Now, if this means to change the rule of the games, well, I don't know, and I don't like that. But on the other hand, we must be ready to have different products for different type of audience available in the years to come.
You mentioned the broadcast model and broadcast rights there, Umberto, and clearly a fundamental part or fundamental driver of revenue across football. It seems to me that kind of circling just above talk of change or kind of pushing a change agenda in Italy with the media rights discussions that have gone on over the last year or so, in talk of new competitions, whether it's the European Super League, whether it's FIFA's Club World Cup or Gianni Infantino's new master plan tournament. There's private equity money sitting behind all of this. And I'm interested in your view as an established leader in sport. What is your view on private equity money becoming involved in governing bodies in general?
Well, there are different examples now. First, to say that there's never been more liquidity than nowadays. There's a lot of money available. And all of a sudden, sports in general, not only football, has been discovered as one of the potential destinations. I was considering today the situation with CVC fund that went through rugby and volleyball. There are private investors into FIBA club competitions. There are opportunities about media companies or media hubs to be acquired by funds in different leagues and so on. What I find difficult to understand and accept is pretty much the same thing that was behind the Super League. When it is become all financial driven and there is no involvement of people of the game or people that knows the game, then it becomes, how can I say, tentative and very fragile. Super League didn't have or didn't seem to have football people behind it, but just financial institutions. And this is the attitude of a world that comes and say, we are big, we have big money, we know how to do it, let's make it in football as well. And there are so many peculiarities into sports and into different sports that needs to be addressed. So not necessarily bad thing, but needs to be somehow guided and lead by people with knowledge of the game.
Umberto, we'll come back to you in a second. I want to bring Keegan Pearce from LaLiga back in here. Keegan, we've identified a number of challenges and problems and issues facing football over the last few minutes. Where are the quick wins here? What can organisations like LaLiga, governing bodies, teams, potentially even all three working together? Where's the low-hanging fruit as you see it?
No, first of all, what Umberto just mentioned reminded me of a phrase about the Super League project where someone said it was designed by people who knew the price of everything but the value of nothing. And I think it was very much what was proven in terms of the fan reaction to fan and stakeholder reaction to that particular project. In terms of quick wins, I think the first thing that any industry needs to do is to understand what's the problem you're trying to solve. Because if you don't have that consensus, you're not going to come to the right solutions. Certainly, our organization, since 2013, we've implemented a series of financial controls. We're talking about financial fair play, which is implemented by LaLiga and not the European UEFA level of financial fair play, where clubs are forced to live within their means, where we not only check what they've spent after the fact, but we actually look at their revenues in real time and ensure that what they spend, the problem that you guys were talking about with the pyramid and that race to spend more and more to remain in the pyramid or to climb up it, we make sure that there is a real-time monitoring of revenues that is tied to what you're allowed to spend on the sporting side. And so our recommendations really are to take a model like that is based upon technology and information that we can have access to in this day and age, and to apply it so that football is governed with clubs living within their means.
Umberto, final question to you. As we mentioned, you are now working in basketball, running Italy's top basketball league, and that's a sport that, particularly in Europe over the past decade, has been through an at times painful process of breakaways and a split. Tell us a little bit about what you're learning about the sport of basketball and what lessons there might be for football in terms of governance, in terms of the way it's structured and the way that the money flows around.
Well, I'm not too sure that there are lessons to be learned from what happened, because if you go back to 2000, I think it was about 2000, when the EuroLeague process came to life and there was the first breakup. And I remember we football clubs at top level European football, we were all looking at the reaction of the stakeholders and in particular of the European Court of Justice and the European Commission to that breakaway. And the reality is that 20 years after, we are still waiting to have a final decision from the Court of Justice, because probably basketball was not so, how can I say, appealing, was not so important, socially speaking, to the European community. Now, what happened to Super League is exactly the other way example. So football is so important and so radically involved into our social lives that it cannot break away without any consequences. And this is the first lesson. First lessons. I found pretty much complicated what's going on into the European scenario as far as competitions are considered. Everybody is clear about what the Italian league or the Spanish league or the German leagues are doing. Then it comes to the international level, and you have a different kind of competition which are selected not on merit, but on franchise, license, or whatever it is. And so you have the winner of a certain championship that does not go to the best competition, which is now considered the EuroLeague, but maybe go to the Eurocup. And if it does not go to the Eurocup because Eurocup has decided not to select, it goes to Basketball Champions League, which is run by FIBA. I think it's pretty much confusing. And it's taking away a lot of merit to the European sports pyramid, which is exactly what it is based in football.
Umberto, we got there in the end. Really appreciate you joining us and sticking with us, and we will get you back on again, I'm sure, to talk about some of these things in more detail. Umberto Gandini, thanks ever so much. Keegan, final word from you and from LaLiga. You talked about technology earlier. Obviously, the internationalisation of LaLiga is something that we've talked about a lot, and I know is really at the heart of a lot of what you're doing. How is LaLiga tooling itself up for this new era of European football, even if we don't quite know what that might look like?
You know, I think we're all facing similar challenges across European football. What we're continuing to invest in is our international expansion, as you said, David. Present through 11 offices in 55 countries around the world. We're certainly investing in our broadcast product, which we feel is the best in football in terms of technology, data, the viewer experience, things that bring in viewers of all ages and feel like they can engage better with the game. And then, as I mentioned before, LaLiga Tech is a new era of LaLiga's growth, taking all of the learnings that we've had over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, investing millions of euros in developing proprietary technologies, and to be able to now share that technology with stakeholders across professional sport, not only to assist with their growth, but also to continue the growth of La Liga and its clubs. So exciting times and plenty more as we look ahead.
Good stuff, Keegan. Really appreciate you joining us. We've noticed the leader's lanyard behind you as well, deliberately placed, I'm sure. Very good to see you, and we'll see you again, hopefully in person very soon.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Keegan. And you can join many of the senior leaders who will be shaping what the future looks like, perhaps even including Keegan, Umberto and Ebru at Leaders Week London in October at Twickenham. Yes, James, it's a live, in-person, real-life event. No internet connections required, as we will be joined by C-suite executives from the likes of AS Monaco, Liverpool, Bayern Munich, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Brentford and plenty more besides.
Visit leadersinsport.com/LW London to join them and to find out what we've got planned across 5 to 7 October this year.
Leaders Live is back Thursday, 29th of July at 3 p.m. UK. It's an Olympics special, so bring your medals. Until then, thanks to Ebru, thanks to Keegan, to Umberto, James, thanks to you as well.
And to you, David.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to you for watching. Bye-bye.